Have you ever wondered why some people seem to have more hours in the day than others? Why some manage to build empires while others can barely pay their bills, even though they work just as hard? Maybe you wake up tired every day, run around non-stop, and still feel like you're always behind, always catching up, always one step away from where you should be. Deep down, you know something needs to change. You just don't know exactly what. What if I told you the answer might be in the hours when you're still asleep? This is the story of a boy who grew up poor, with no prospects, believing that life had decided his fate before he was even born. His father worked as a janitor in a commercial building, earned very little, and never had a formal education. But that same father carried a secret his son would only understand decades later. A secret that began every day at 5 in the morning, when the world was still asleep and most people couldn't even imagine getting out of bed. What happened during those quiet hours changed the destiny of an entire family forever. Stay with me until the end, because this story may transform the way you see your own mornings. It doesn't matter where you came from, how much money you have, or how many times you've failed. What matters is what you do when no one is watching, during the hours when it would be easier to keep sleeping. Maybe you'll discover that the secret to changing your life isn't working more, but waking up earlier. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow at 5 in the morning will be the beginning of a completely different story for you. In a small town in rural Texas, there lived a boy named Marcus. He was 11 years old and lived with his parents in a cramped apartment behind a commercial building. His father, William, had worked as a janitor in that same building for 15 years. He cleaned offices, changed light bulbs, fixed leaks, did everything no one else wanted to do. His mother, Dorothy, worked part-time as a cashier at a grocery store. Together, they could barely pay the bills. There was no money for luxuries, for trips, or for new clothes. Marcus wore donated clothes and shoes that had already belonged to 3 other boys before him. At school, Marcus was invisible. He wasn't popular, wasn't an athlete, and wasn't the smartest kid in class. He was just another poor boy who sat in the back of the room and tried not to draw attention. The other students didn't bully him. They simply ignored him. To them, Marcus didn't exist. And little by little he began to believe that too, that he didn't exist, that he didn't matter, that his destiny had been written before he was even born. Son of a janitor, grandson of a failed farmer, great-grandson of immigrants who never had anything, poverty felt like a genetic inheritance he couldn't escape. What bothered Marcus most wasn't poverty itself. It was shame. Shame about inviting friends to his house. Shame about his father's job. Shame about wearing clothes everyone knew were donated. Once, a classmate asked what his father did for a living. Marcus lied. He said his father was a building maintenance manager. The classmate laughed and said that was just a fancy way of saying janitor. Marcus felt his face burn. That night, he cried quietly in the bathroom, and he began to hate his own life. William noticed his son's suffering, even though Marcus never said a word. He saw the boy withdrawn, silent, avoiding talking about school. He saw the shame in his eyes when they crossed paths with building tenants in the elevator. It hurt more than any hard labor William had ever done. But he didn't know how to fix it with words. William had never been good with words. He had only studied through 6th grade. He didn't know how to give motivational speeches or offer elaborate advice. He knew only one thing: how to work hard and show through actions. That's when William made a decision that would change everything. He didn't say anything to his son. He made no promises, gave no explanations. He simply started. The following Monday, William woke Marcus at 4:55 in the morning. The boy opened his eyes in shock, thinking something was wrong. His father stood beside the bed, already dressed, holding a cup of coffee. "Get up," William said. "We have work to do." Marcus didn't understand. What work? It was still dark outside. But something in his father's eyes made him obey without questioning. In the small kitchen of the apartment, William had prepared 2 cups of coffee and placed some books on the table. Old books, bought at thrift stores, used bookstores and garage sales. Books about history, science, math, and biographies of people who had made something of their lives. William sat on one side of the table and pointed to the chair across from him. "Sit," he said. Marcus sat down, still confused, still sleepy. William opened one of the books and began reading out loud, slowly, stumbling over some words because his own education was limited. Marcus stayed quiet, listening, not understanding what any of it meant. After 30 minutes of reading, William closed the book and looked at his son. "Starting today," he said, "we're going to wake up at 5 every morning. You're going to study for 1 hour before school. It doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if it's cold. It doesn't matter if you don't want to. You'll do it anyway." Marcus wanted to protest, wanted to say it was crazy, that he needed sleep. But his father's gaze was firm. It wasn't anger, it wasn't a threat. It was something Marcus had never seen before. It was determination. And something about that determination made the boy stay silent and simply nod. The first few weeks were hell. Marcus hated waking up at 5 in the morning. He hated the early morning cold, hated the bitter coffee, hated those old books that smelled like mold. His entire body protested. His eyes burned with sleep during class. He dragged himself through the day like a zombie, counting the hours until he could sleep again. Many times he thought about quitting, about telling his father he couldn't take it anymore. But every morning, when he opened his eyes at 4:55, William was already there, standing, dressed, holding a cup of coffee, waiting. And something about that silent consistency made Marcus get up. William never yelled, never threatened, never punished him. He simply showed up. Every single day without exception. Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, rainy days, freezing cold days. It didn't matter. At 5 in the morning, father and son were sitting at that small table, studying together. William read along when he could, and when the material was too difficult for him, he simply stayed there in silence, drinking his coffee while his son studied. His presence was the message. "I am here. I believe in you. Even if I don't know the answers, I will not abandon you." By the 3rd month, something began to change. Marcus realized he was understanding the lessons more easily. Concepts that once seemed impossible now made sense. He started raising his hand in class, something he had never done before. The first time he answered a question correctly, the teacher looked surprised. "Marcus, you're right. Very good." It was only 4 words, but for Marcus, it felt like the entire world had changed color. He existed. Someone had noticed that he existed. The following months brought more changes. Marcus's grades began to improve, slowly at first, then consistently. He went from an average student to one of the best in the class. Teachers started paying attention to him. Classmates who had once ignored him now asked for help with homework. Marcus discovered that he liked math, that he had a talent for solving complex problems. And more importantly, he discovered something he had never felt before. Confidence. Not the arrogant confidence of someone who is born with everything, but the quiet confidence of someone who built something from nothing with his own hands. William watched everything in silence. He never celebrated, never exaggerated his praise. When Marcus showed him a test with a high grade, his father simply nodded and said, "Good job, keep going." It wasn't coldness. It was William's way of saying that this was just the beginning, that there was much more ahead. And Marcus understood. He understood that his father wasn't creating a moment of pride. He was building a habit for a lifetime. 5 in the morning wasn't about a test or a grade. It was about becoming a different person, someone who doesn't wait for things to happen, but wakes up before the sun to make them happen. At 16, Marcus earned a partial scholarship to an elite preparatory school in Houston. It was the first time he had ever left his hometown. The farewell was quiet, like everything between father and son. At the bus station, William hugged Marcus briefly and said just 3 sentences. "Don't forget 5 in the morning. It doesn't matter where you are. That's how we change our destiny." Marcus nodded, a lump in his throat. He boarded the bus and looked out the window as his father grew smaller and smaller, a building janitor who could barely read, waving to the son who was on his way to conquer the world. At the new school, Marcus faced challenges he had never imagined. The other students were children of doctors, lawyers, business owners. They had traveled to other countries, spoke other languages, and knew things Marcus didn't even know existed. For the first time in years, he felt inferior again. The old shame returned, whispering that he didn't belong there, that he was an imposter, that sooner or later everyone would discover he was just the son of a janitor. But then, every morning at 5 o'clock, while the entire dormitory was still asleep, Marcus got up. He sat at his small desk, opened his books, and studied in silence, just as his father had taught him. The years passed. Marcus graduated as the top student at the preparatory school. He earned a full scholarship to study engineering at one of the best universities in the country, in Boston. He continued waking up at 5 in the morning. During college, while other students slept until noon and complained about not having enough time, Marcus had already studied for 3 hours before the first class even began. He wasn't the smartest in his class. There were people with more natural talent, but no one worked harder, no one was more consistent, and little by little consistency beat talent. At 26, Marcus graduated with honors and was hired by one of the largest technology companies in the country. At 32, he had risen to director of engineering. At 38, he founded his own software company, which in 5 years became one of the most innovative in the industry. Business magazines began seeking him out for interviews. They wanted to know his secret. How had the son of a janitor from a small town in rural Texas come so far? Marcus always gave the same answer. "I wake up at 5 in the morning every day." They laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. At 45, Marcus was a wealthy man. He had a large house in Austin, imported cars, a beautiful family. He traveled the world, met influential people, and had achieved everything society considers success. But the thing he valued most cost nothing. It was a phone call he made every week, always at the same time, Sunday at 7 in the morning. On the other end of the line, William's aged voice answered, "Hi, Dad, how are you?" And they talked for an hour, about everything and about nothing. Two people who had built together something no amount of money could buy. William never left that small apartment behind the building. He never wanted to. Marcus offered dozens of times to buy his parents a house, to get them out of there. William always refused. "I'm fine here," he would say. "Your mother is too. We don't need a mansion to be happy. We need purpose." Marcus understood. He understood that his father didn't measure success in square footage or bank balances. He measured it in something far more valuable, seeing his son become the man he had always known he could be. On an April morning, Marcus's phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was his mother, crying. William had suffered a heart attack during the night. He didn't make it. He passed away in silence just as he had lived. Marcus took the first flight to Texas. He spent the entire trip looking out the window, remembering all those mornings. The cup of coffee waiting, the old books on the table, his father standing beside the bed at 4:55, never missing a single day. And now, for the first time in 34 years, Marcus would wake up at 5 in the morning, and his father would not be there. The funeral was simple, just as William would have wanted. Few people, no display, only those who truly mattered. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus stood before his father's coffin and looked at those present. "My father was a janitor," he began. "He spent his entire life cleaning up other people's messes. He never made much money. He never earned a degree. Many people looked at him and saw a simple, insignificant man. But those people didn't know his secret." Marcus took a deep breath. "My father woke up at 5 in the morning every day to teach me how to become someone. Not with speeches, not with theories, with presence. He was there every morning, showing me that discipline is love in the form of action. My friend, Marcus's story is proof that your destiny is not written in the stars. It is written in your mornings. In what you do when no one is watching, when it would be easier to keep sleeping, when the world is still silent." William was a janitor who could barely read, but he knew something many doctors don't know. He knew that consistency beats talent, that presence is worth more than words, that the greatest gift you can give someone is believing in them before they even believe in themselves. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like now. That simple gesture helps more people find this message when they need it most. Leave a comment telling us what time you'll wake up tomorrow, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who believes their destiny is already decided, share this video with them. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this every week. And remember, while you are sleeping, someone is building the future. The question is, tomorrow at 5 in the morning, where will you be?